Lady of the Donbass. Sarah, let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Sarah from Ddgeopolitics. Sarah, tell everybody where they can find all your stuff online.
Ddgeopolitics.com, or find us and talk to us on Twitter and Telegram in our chat.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you still have your YouTube? You have your YouTube, right?
Yes, we have a YouTube still. We are not banned anymore. And we have gotten really, well, I've gotten really active on Substack. You're not missing anything on Twitter, Garland. It's a S show. It's a terrible app these days. So I've really just been focusing a lot of my energy on Substack and actually researching things, because the people that were told they are the news now by Trump and Elon are not really doing a good job of doing the news.
Well, you
got to pick up the slack.
The other thing about X is, for all of this crap about, oh, we're coming to stop censorship, oh, it's going to be all open, and like it seems to have devolved back into where it was before. Every time I turn around, I'm hearing about another person who got the Garland Nixon treatment. Every other day, there's another person saying, Twitter locked me out of my account, and it says that they can't identify me as the owner of this account and Twitter. And so, you know, for all of the crap they gave us about how they were opposed to censorship, it's a free speech platform. It has just fallen back into what it already was, a government intelligence agency monitored platform. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, it's just, you can talk about things you couldn't talk about. Like if you want to talk about Ukraine, maybe you can talk about that. Yeah. If you want to talk about some things, if you want to talk about maybe COVID, if you're still into talking about that, fine, no problem. Say all you want to do about the jab. Now, if you got an issue with Zionism or perhaps a genocide, you might be out the window.
Or so, you know, about Elon himself.
Oh,
yes, no, it's all about Elon's feels on that app. So don't hurt Elon's feels.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you know, it was all a fraud. Anyway, so let's get going. Let's talk about the Goose-Steppers in Germany. You know, the parties who say they must outlaw the AfD because the AfD is a Nazi party. Yeah. But they don't have a problem sending all kinds of weapons to guys who are proud literal Nazis, who literally walk around with Hitler tattoos, who, you know, proclaim themselves as the Fourth Reich or Reich 3.1 or whatever it is. And so they've got good old Merz, who this guy's the real deal. And they're making hollow threats, the latest about Storm Shadow missiles or whatever, which I'll just say one thing. For all the talk about Storm Shadow missiles, in theory, they could be problematic, but the Russian air defense system seems to be really, really operating well. I don't think it's as big a threat as the Germans would like to believe it is, but still, it's the principle of the thing. Your thoughts on Merz in Germany and their uppityness on the international military scale?
Wild, right? That he kind of alluded to sending them Taurus missiles. This is a topic that's been kind of on the tip of everybody's tongue since the Storm Shadows were brought in there. They figured the Taurus would be next. Definitely is the feeling that I got. I was like, the Taurus are probably already there. But after Merz's statements, the leader of the the SDP came out and said, no, there we are not sending Taurus to. So there's a huge circus and a huge kerfuffle inside of Germany. But the vibe that I got from all of it was that they're already there, because immediately following, they said, well, we'll just go in there and we'll help them make long-range missiles. What's the difference between just giving them your missiles then?
Well, there's so many issues. Number one, because a lot of these missiles, in particular the Taurus missiles, they're fired from planes. Mm-hmm. So as my understanding is, the the Ukrainians don't have the proper platforms to fire them. They'd have to take some of the planes they have and they'd have to change them so they can fire those missiles, and that wouldn't be easy. And it just seems to me there's a lot of talk from the Starmers, the Macrons, we're going to send troops, lots and lots of troops. And then the military comes out and says, we don't have the troops to send. But they keep saying we're going to send troops. Starmer, we may send troops. Then the military is like, we can't do that.
Yeah,
and Starmer's like, and Starmer's like, yeah, but we may send troops. And do you get the feeling at times a lot of this barking is simply they have a fear about the peace negotiations, and they want to do everything they can to throw a monkey wrench in those rhetorically?
I do. And that happened yesterday. I wrote an article over the weekend about the privatization of Ukraine. And aside from BlackRock and all the ones that we're familiar with, under this recent admin, and even the Europeans are in on it, is a massive wave of privatizations of Ukraine. Once I saw that and who was involved, I was like, they're not ending this war anytime soon. This is going to be the new Iraq or the new Afghanistan. Not as severe, obviously, because we can't do that to our fellow Europeans. But there's this privatization is so rampant, and the corruption, and there's still so much money to be made for the evil people, the black hats, I guess you would call them, that I don't think that they want to end it. So all of this, yes, this is added rhetoric. It's posturing. It helps throw a little bit of a wrench in it. It gets the Russians kind of like fired up in a way, because Masha goes and says something, and Lavrov says something, and Medvedev says something, right? And it kind of gets people worked up. I do agree. I don't think that they want it to end.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the colonial game. That's part of the history of the France and Germany's and the Western European powers, and that is to go into a country. And we will all recall what happened when they first overthrew the government of Ukraine. They went in, and just American companies everywhere started taking over everything. So you go in and you extract the wealth of the country on the way in. The Biden people extracted the wealth on the way in. The Trump people want to extract whatever's left on the way out, or get it long term. It's like, okay, there is, a body there, and we must extract everything out of that body, that state entity. What do they have? Do they have minerals? Do they have soil that can grow things? Do they have corpus? Do they have mines? Do they have anything? And that is what they do. If it's Africa, if it's Asia, whatever the case, if you're the Brits or the Germans or the Americans, you go into a country and you steal everything that's not nailed down. And I think what they're looking at now is, if for some reason to the worst of their horror, that things don't work out, they still work out, because they get to steal everything and this is the way they stand up for Ukraine. They help Ukraine. They look out for the Ukrainians against the evil Russians by robbing everything they get. One of these days, the Ukrainians are going to look over their shoulder and say, it wasn't the Russians that were our enemies. I believe that.
Oh, absolutely. And it is this idea of, like, even the mineral deal that was accompanied by the $50 million weapons contracts. It's very much like, give us your natural resources, we'll protect them. You obviously can't. Let us protect them. Sign on the dotted line. It's very sinister. It's very exploitive. It's really, really bad. It's very sad for Ukrainians. And I do think that when the dust settles, which could be a long time now, we're looking probably maybe even a decade, that once the dust settles, they're going to, just like everybody else does. Wow, the grass really wasn't greener.
Well, here's the other part of it too, and I think that's important, and that is that part of the concern of these Western European countries is not just about Ukraine. It's that they're suffering economic collapse in the near future, rather than in the closer to, sooner rather than later. That's the term I was looking for. That if you look at France losing the Sahel and the amount of gold and uranium and all the stuff that they were making, that's gone, that's lost. If they can't get that back, which they probably can't, what's the guy's name who was the after World War II? He ran the resistance and then he became the prime minister right after World War. I can't think of his name. The most famous guy. And anyway, the CIA tried to overthrow him. Anyway, he said,
Lumumba, Sankara,
no, in France, the French prime minister,
De Gaulle.
De Gaulle. De Gaulle said that if they lost Africa, that France was like basically a third world country. So now France is looking at these countries are like, we've got to get this Russia thing so we can take all of Russia's natural resources and stuff, because they're looking at poverty. They're broke. They have nothing. And I don't think they have a decade. I don't think they got 5 to 6 years before they're facing revolution and uprising, because the people of Europe are accustomed to a certain level of economic development. And they're going to wake up and say, holy crap, we're an impoverished backwater country living in boxes and shanty towns. That's not going to go over big.
I agree. I think that especially in the case of France and Germany, that they are on the brink. This decolonialization in the real sense of the word, with the France thing, that was authentic decolonization out of Africa. Germany also lost a lot in Africa as well via AFRICOM. So that I 100% agree. I think Spain is a little bit different. They're kind of on their own path. But with France and Germany, yes, they need it out and they need it quick. Germany has started looking at China and started playing that. They're saying that they will never allow Nord Stream 2, which shows another kind of nail in the coffin of this. We're going to keep going at Russia. So I do think that they are on the brink, because they're getting more and more irrational and they're looking for other options.
Yeah, I think with Germany particularly, they have reverted to their standard ideology. That's the way I would look at it, which is fascism. Particularly the German ruling elite, they've reverted to fascism. That's who they are, and that's what they've reverted to. And it is an irrational and self-defeating ideology. So now the only way out for them would be cheap Russian energy. And what are they saying? No, we hate the Russians, because the foundation of European fascism is to hate Russia. Because the foundation of European fascism is to take out Russia and steal everything it has. So they're just going to cut their own throats. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. And that I'm so glad you brought that up. That's what that's what fascism is. It's a reaction to the revolutionary left, which was communism. So that is, it obviously devolved into an anti-Russia thing, because communism was all in Europe, was all coming from Russia. It was all Stalin. So yes, it evolved into that. So that's the kind of these fascists or these neoliberal fascists kind of fall onto, because I mean, obviously Russia's not communist anymore, but that's still the threat. So they still kind of embody that. I wonder sometimes if they know how fascist they sound, or there's a total lack of self-awareness. I get the feeling that people like Ursula don't know what they sound like.
Well, you know, the old saying, fish discover water last, right? So, it's like fascism. What is that? That's what Putin is. And fascism means anything bad that we don't like is fascism. The things that we don't like. It doesn't have a definition that is bound to an ideology. It has a definition they project onto. The old saying in psychology is, what is it? Deny, project, attack. It's not me, it's you. And then I attack you for being what I see in myself.
Darvo, right?
Deny, I don't know.
Attack, reject, victimize, and then something else.
Yes. But so I just project onto you whatever I really am, and then I hate it. And I think that's what we're looking at. It's clear. It is so clear. Well, there also was it Lenin or whoever they called it, end stage capitalism, crisis capitalism. But one thing is clear, that Europe is in an extreme economic crisis, and that their economic model just isn't going to work for them anymore.
No, they need options, and those options don't exist in Europe except for a little bit in Serbia, which they've taken advantage of already. And obviously keeping the Eastern Bloc as destabilized as possible in Moldova and Romania. But yeah, they're looking for other options. Saw France recently started acting up in what's New Caledonia.
Of course.
They've started making moves in the Azerbaijan-Armenia region. So yeah, they're looking for other options. That's when things start really getting interesting, because these are all warm spots that can quickly become hot spots that can devolve into ethnic war or other types of economic war very quickly. It's funny that my boss is in is in the chat. He said Lavrov agreed with Garland. He did. He said Germany's going to stay on the same exact path they did before, the path to ruin, and that they're going to ruin themselves. And I think that's quite accurate. That this, I think they're being a little bit hyperbolic, but I don't think that Ursula von der Leyen or Merz is generally Adolf Hitler. They definitely don't have the same command or charisma, and they're obviously not as fervent or as ardent. But this is this sort of polarity between Germany and Russia, that there's one faction inside of Germany that says this doesn't have to exist, and the faction that's usually in charge is the faction that says there are forever boogeyman. That's it. It's kind of like the United States and Iran, or the United States and China. They will always be the boogeyman.
Yeah, well, I think the faction in Germany is East Germany. A big part of it. And here, but see, there is a difference, because I've mentioned this before. World War I was, all of these Germany and France and the UK and all battling over who gets to divide up Africa or whatever, colonial divisions. World War II, was they decided to, okay, we'll take out Russia, we'll build this fascist state in Germany, we'll finance it, we'll let it go, and off it'll go to take out Russia. Well, it was got a bit out of control, and they had to struggle with it themselves. But that was still about taking out Russia. Germany was built by the Allies, by the West, to take out Russia. It was an attack dog that they trained to take out Russia, just got out of control. It was a mad dog rather than an attack dog, right? Yeah. Now they're up to the same old tricks. So let's take out Russia. We'll go into Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a difference here. Here's the difference. The US had industrial capitalism. There was a powerful industrial base in Britain, in Germany, in the West. However, because they're all finance capital now, they have wiped out their industrial base, and they no longer have the ability industrially to produce the weaponry and things of that nature that they would need for a major war. So they're all mouth now. And instead, what did they do? They're finance capital. How were they going to take Russia out? With sanctions. Finance capital.
It's economic war, right? We'll take you off our banking system. But there's the thing as well, is that this is where kind of things start to kind of cracks begin to show, because Europe was kept demilitarized for us to make money. So they were kind of said, go ahead and bark behind the apron strings, or hide behind mom's dress, and go ahead and levy those threats. We've got your back with the big guns. And they're kind of still acting in that manner. And Trump is saying, we don't want to do that anymore, because we're deindustrialized too. But that's besides the point. But that's where a lot of this comes from. And it's so important that you said that they built up Germany to take on the Russians. This is something that people, especially in the West, don't really have in the forefront of their understanding of World War II. They think that Adolf Hitler was just some organic upstart that took over Germany out of nowhere. They don't think about the Anglo influence, especially the Anglo influence, and that when Germany was obviously the tides were turning and Germany was going to lose, and they were a bit rogue, and plus they were all on a lot of drugs. So once they started to lose, the Allies switched sides. They opened up that Western Front, and they took the victory from both of them. So it's really important to understand that, and that this is not a playbook that they've never used before. Look up read the Grand Chessboard, read Multipolarity. They constantly do. Another great book I read is Conjuring Hitler. It sounds spooky. It's not about that. It's about how they made Hitler to go against the Russians. So this is playbooks that they've been using forever, and maybe they'll use Merz in such a sense. But
Conjuring Hitler had some good stuff in it, but it had some crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Yeah, like the Russians were in on it, and they helped build Hitler. I'm like,
there was this Russian contingent in Turkey was in on it, but there was a lot of good stuff.
But there was a lot of good info. You're right. From the grand scheme, they missed a few things pretty bad, that the Russians were working with Hitler, but there was some good facts you could pull out of it. I'll put it like that. Yeah. And what's interesting now is the the weakening of the France's and the Germanys and these Western European colonial powers, they got weak, but then they tied themselves to the U.S. empire, right? So now we've got a division of labor, which was never more apparent than in Ukraine. You've got a division of labor. This is what we're going to do in Ukraine. You got MI6. The British are going to handle all the intelligence stuff. They're, some CIA, but MI6 is they're going to put Zelensky in power. They're going to put the government together. Okay, France, who has, the history with the French Foreign Legion, we're going to handle mercenaries. We'll bring in all of the mercenaries for all over the world. The United States is the muscle. We're going to bring in the big guns, literally and figuratively, right? So then the division of labor, and that's the way they've been doing anything. Even in Africa, France was able to maintain its colonial power in Africa. Why? Because it could use U.S. bases and U.S. intelligence and things like that to maintain that going. And the U.S. is kind of going broke. And here's the problem they have. The U.S. can't afford it anymore. That's the problem they have. The U.S. is like, oh, crap. We're like getting calls from creditors. Hey, what about our money? We're like, oh, crap, in another year, we ain't going to be able to pay nobody, right? So the U.S. is having to pull back because they just can't afford to float this thing. They attached themselves to this rich empire that was floating all European imperialism and American imperialism. And now it's like, I guess we've overspent. We can't necessarily, we're still way overstretched, but we can't float European imperialism and American imperialism, and European imperialism is in a panic because they don't know what to do.
They really don't. They've been completely emasculated. We've already talked about their ousting, their dramatic ousting out of Africa. That was a huge hit between Nord Stream 2 and the decolonization of the Sahel. That took out Central Europe. People didn't talk about that. I mean, we did. We talked about it a ton. But people didn't talk about that enough and what that really meant when they were kicked out of the Sahel and how serious. Because these crazy Africans, they'll never succeed. We don't take them seriously. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traore is like building up the entire country. But that's exactly what it is. People say, oh, the age of American imperialism is dead. No, you brought it up. We're in finance capitalism and a service industry. That is our imperialism. That's it. And our intelligence industry, our tech industry, that's imperialism. Starlink is all over the world. That's American imperialism. And no new wars. We also, we kind of bite off a lot more than we can chew. We say no new wars. What that really translates to is no new deployments, no new American troops deployed to new locations. But they'll fill every location up with all the mercenaries they can find. And they have, and that's what they've done in Gaza. But they're running short on even that. So we're coming to a breaking point. We're coming to a fork in the road. And I think that we're also seeing that in Trump's recent behavior regarding very erratic, very irrational regarding Ukraine and Russia. He started off a little bit more pragmatic and level-headed from January, February, March. And lately it's been like, what are you talking about? So I think we're just seeing them trying to see what sticks at this point. It's very crazy how they're just willing to shoot themselves in the foot or just walk over the cliff like lemmings all over Russia just because they're unwilling to admit that Russia has bested them.
Yeah, well, and what we're seeing is an empire in crisis. The U.S. empire is in economic crisis, is in political crisis, which all that results in economic crisis. And Western Europe is in crisis from deindustrializing and turning themselves into nothing but finance capital, and money will be made off of magical financial tools, asset-backed securities and derivatives and things of that nature. So they make nothing. That nothing's really real anymore for them financially, industrially, and they put themselves in a desperate position. And now, what's interesting is this, and that is that when Biden blew Nord Stream, clearly the U.S. blew Nord Stream. We said Biden. I don't even know Biden knew what the hell he was doing, to be frank. But when the U.S. blew Nord Stream, what it really did was it made Europeans start buying all their energy from the U.S. It made the Europeans more dependent on the U.S. It meant that the U.S. could make more money. And instead of, it's like the slave master saying, "Please, master, don't give me my freedom."
Yep.
Please don't let me go. I want to be your slave. But make me work harder. Take all of my earnings. Do everything. I don't want to, because the U.S. is like, be free. Go on. Oh, by the way, but we want all your money while you're free. Just move on. Just give us everything you got. Like, we're shaking them down for every dime. It's so obvious the U.S. is shaking them down for every dime, and that the European ruling elite are complicit. Which leads me to believe that one of these days they might get their heads cut off when the people wake up and realize that these are a bunch of traitors. But anyway, your thoughts on all of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's hope for France. They protest every other weekend. We just need them to get very serious. And this summer might be explosive. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about class conflict and class consciousness lately. So this summer might be explosive. But yes, we did shake them down, and we're still doing it. And this statement about Nord Stream recently from Merz is makes me. What do they have on Germany? What is stopping Germany from actually repairing Nord Stream? I believe that, was it the Russians that recently said they could repair it, or was somebody recently said they could repair it? And then today Merz says that they will not be repairing that at all, ever. Why? And what are you going to do? I just, it's not making any sense, as even just to analyze it from a realist perspective. I'm not really kind of understanding. And what we did after Nord Stream was insane. They could have kept getting oil from Russia via India, or they could have kept getting, they had to get from us, and we overcharged them as much as we could, our allies. The whole thing is just, it's a circus. It's all starting to come to a head right now. I think this summer is going to be a wild one with the Russian offensive building and attacks getting bigger and bigger. I don't think that this summer is going to be pretty intense, I think.
There's another side of me that says this. If I'm the Russians, I'll just throw this at you, because there are people saying the Russians want to, go ahead and deliver a knockout punch. There's another side of me that says this. Time is really on the Russian side, and the longer this thing goes on, the weaker Europe gets, the more unstable Europe gets, the more impoverished Europe gets, the more the NATO continuity phrase, right? It's like, if this is just if the Russians had won in 3 months, then we wouldn't have had what happened in Africa. Wouldn't have happened. Their alliance with North Korea wouldn't have happened. A lot of things wouldn't have happened that have happened. So in a way, if I'm the Russians, I'm like, yeah, I do want to deliver a knockout punch because it's a war and I want to get it over. But man, the longer this goes on, the more my enemy collapses. And if it does drag out, they're like, yes, we want it to drag out. If I'm the Russians, I'm like, well, it ain't working out well for you as it drags out. So perhaps it may be better off for me, and really bad news for you, because you're the one coming unglued, not me. Sometimes I feel like that.
I have to agree. I mean, they look at everything that's happened over the last 3 years. They've got a huge foothold in Africa, in the Sahel. They've got 3 proteges of Putin now running things there. They don't even really need that much Wagner. Their strength, or their relationship with China has never been stronger. Ever. Their relationship with North Korea is out of control. They're fighting in the war with Russians. Like, this is the only thing that we can look at over the last 3 years that has been somewhat disastrous for Russia was Syria. And at the end of the day, it's a net positive for Russia to be out of Syria. It's a net positive for Russia to be out of the Levant. So I agree. And it's that sort of pragmatic, that sort of Lao Tzu, right? Or was it Sun Tzu that said, wait by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by. And these are civilizational states, and this is how they do foreign policy and diplomacy. They do it pragmatically, they do it slowly, and they do it meticulously. And they watch. They're not reactionary. They watch things, and they understand patterns. It's very different from the way the West does, especially America, who has spearheaded every Western war effort since Vietnam. So you're absolutely right. Time is so much on, and it's on the side of China as well. All they have to do is wait and watch.
I think that also with Syria, 2 things. Number one, the Russians were able to maintain their bases there, which they use for jump off points for Africa, etc. I think the other thing is that it's a terrible tragedy, and the Russians wouldn't want Syria to fall. But
No.
I also think that the Russians recognize they're in an existential fight on their border and they can't fight everywhere. And that the US would, and the imperialists would love for them to divert a lot of a lot of their resources to Syria to have to fight there,
Yep.
because that would weaken Russia. And so while I'm sure Russia wanted to be a good ally with Syria and wanted to help Assad, he made some errors. He did make some errors. And let's not pretend that the imperial powers don't still have a lot of horsepower, that they were able to, sanction and weaken and then buy out some of the people in the military. And there was just a lot of things that I think Russia realizes they can't control the world, and they have to do what they can where they can, and they have to make strategic decisions. And I think the strategic decision was Ukraine right now. We're going to have to let Syria play out, but we can't. And I really think they're unhappy about it, but I think they had to make strategic decisions. I mean, people forget Russia's a powerful nation and Russia has a powerful military, but Russia doesn't have the power to project their military might around the world, maybe as much as people think they were. They're more of a defensive presence, and they do have some, but that's not their forte. And I think there are some limits to Russia that, we do have to accept.
I agree. And there's also that pragmatism where they look at other empires, i.e. the British and the American empire, and they learn that we shouldn't spread ourselves very thin. We don't need to be a forward deployed country. We don't need to engage in this sort of thing. So I believe that. I mean, and I also wanted to say that recently, I don't know if it was Shara or one of like his constituents, or one of his peers, but they said, we want to thank Ukraine, because without them, we wouldn't have gotten Syria. I was like, that's a really good point. I didn't even really think of it that way. And I was like, maybe this isn't that positive for Russia. And that's kind of when I started thinking, like, it's better off that Russia is not even embroiled in the Syria thing. They're taking care of civilians at all their bases. They're doing what they can. And that's how they should remain. They should just remain a neutral kind of bystander and try to engage as least as possible.
Yeah, I think they're waiting for their opportunity. And also, here's the other part of it, too. When you look at Russia and China and Iran, unlike the imperial powers, they understand there's going to be wins and losses, but I don't think they count their wins and losses over the courses of months. I think they count their wins and losses over the course of decades, right? So yes, Syria has fallen, and that's a terrible thing, but over the course of time, and it's horrible things going on in Syria, and I'm sure they feel bad and they're opposed to it, but they understand, as I said, they can't do everything everywhere in the world, because let's say they start fighting in Syria. Well, the next thing you know, the imperialists say, great, let's get something going in the Caucasus, and before you know it, they got Russians fighting everywhere except Ukraine. But I think they understand that in the long term, the Syrian situation is not going to work out well for the imperialists in the long run. I don't think it will. I think it'll devolve into something ugly, but I think it won't work out for them over the course of decades.
I agree.
Your thought, let me ask you this. So I'll throw this at you. Your thoughts on the Trump Truth Social tweets, posts, whatever you want to call them, from this perspective. If you watch Trump's Truth Social posts, one day, things are going well. We're going to get a deal with the Russians. 24 hours later, I don't know what's wrong with the Russians. They've gone crazy. They've lost their minds. The next day, the Russians are doing pretty good. I mean, hey, I love Putin. He's like a brother to me. You know what I mean? If you watch, and I know so many people that do this, they're like on this emotional roller coaster.
Oh, you can't do that with Trump.
And his posts are all the way in one direction, and the next one is all the way in the other direction, all highs or lows, and people jump with it. Hey, did you see the latest Trump post? I think they're going to get a deal within 24 hours. Yeah. Then, did you see the latest Trump post? It's World War III. And I've got to the point where I'm like, what are we doing here?
I think the difference with this recent post was that he went right after Putin. And this was right after he was asked about Putin on the tarmac. And he was like, I don't know what the hell's the matter with that guy. Like, he was like put into like full New Yorker on the tarmac. I think that might have been made a difference, maybe in the Russians' eyes. And then he went after him again on Truth Social. And he said he better, he didn't say there'll be hell to pay. He said something along those lines. I could probably pull it up, but I think that it was a little bit different just because he went right at Putin personally. I thought that was kind of unique about it. And I'm happy. I don't want those two to get along because I have a sick feeling that this, not that I don't want them to be friends or that I'm against it or anti either of them. I have this weird unease that Russia's willingness or their desire to ingratiate themselves with the West could lead to them getting a little bit taken advantage of again. And that's probably just me being biased and weird, but that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm like, I don't, and you know what? They shouldn't let the way that I look at it is the United States hasn't earned a friendship with Russia. They haven't earned an allyship with Russia. It's been Minsk 1, Minsk 2, broken promise after broken promises, not 1 inch, all of the above. They don't deserve it. Not right now, not yet. They haven't earned that yet. So I think Trump's doing exactly what Trump is good at, which is being an entertainer. And I'm certainly entertained because I love when he's screaming at reporters. Then what am I going to tell you? You're fake news. You're fake news. Like I love all of that, but I think this time it was a little bit different, and I think that he is getting quite frustrated.
Well, I tell you when I learned a valuable lesson about Trump. He said that Zelensky's a dictator and a bunch of things about Zelensky, right? And a week later they said, well, what's that about? You said Zelensky's a dictator. Remember Trump's answer? I don't remember saying that. Did I say he's a dictator? He's a good guy. And I'm like, that's his superpower. He can't be boxed in. You can never trap Trump in a corner. I don't care what he says. I don't care what he does. You can never trap him. So whatever he says or whatever he does, if you come to Trump and say, well, Trump, but you said this or that, he'll be like, me? I don't remember saying. I mean, it could be, there was literally videotape of him saying it. And his answer was, did I say that?
Yeah, I mean, he said he knows I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue.
Right. So if you're a person that will completely deny reality, at that point, whatever he says about Putin this week,
out the window. Yeah,
it makes headlines or whatever. No, but I've gotten to a point where I think now let me say one other thing. I'll say one other thing, and this is my position on whether the Russians get taken, because we've been hearing this a long time, right? Here's the discussion. I'm afraid that the Russians will get taken, that they'll give the Americans too good a deal, that they'll somehow get outfoxed by the Americans. Here's my position. I have watched closely Lavrov and Putin and their inner circle about how they played this game since 2014. And I've come to the conclusion that they're just geniuses. They're absolutely brilliant. It's not the amount of power that you have, it's how you play that power. They've played the power like 100 times more than they actually have. I'm not saying Russia's weak. I'm saying there's 3 great powers, but for the amount of economic and military power they have played their hand. They have outfoxed. They have outsmarted the darn the Americans and the Europeans at every corner. Outfoxed them at every. To me, one of the most pronounced occurrences was May 9th, and the Brits come out. Hey, 24 hours, you better take this deal. Otherwise, we're going to have big sanctions. And the Russians say, hey, but why don't we meet Thursday in Istanbul? And I'm like, they did it. They got them again. Every single time. So I've come to the conclusion, there ain't no way in hell these idiots are going to outfox those geniuses. There is no way in the world that Putin and Lavrov and company are going to get outsmarted by Trump, Macron, Starmer, and Merz. I just don't see a universe where that happens.
Probably right. I'm just very gun shy. But Putin is too. I mean, Putin even said so. I mean, you're right. Putin said basically to the effect of, why would I enter in a deal with somebody who's going to be gone in 4 years? Everything changes. Why would I do that? And I think that's now kind of like their sort of mentality when dealing with, especially the Americans. It's a little bit different with the Europeans, but especially with the Americans, they've all said, Lavrov has said something to the effect of, your foreign policy changes every 4 years. What do you mean? So
remember what Lavrov said. This was before this conflict started. He said, the Americans are agreement incapable. He hasn't forgotten that. You know what I mean? He hasn't forgotten that. He is still saying, oh, we're going to work out a deal. We're going to make, they're not doing that because they think the Americans might get a deal, because they think the Americans may, they know as well as you and I know that if the Americans put their signature on a piece of paper, that it's worthless before the ink dries, but they got to play the game. And I think part of the playing the game, what do you think about this? They got allies. I believe a big part of this is they have India, they have China, they've got a lot of allies, and they're more concerned about keeping their allies happy and maintaining a good relationship with their allies and say, see, we're still working on peace. Screw the Americans. They know that the Americans and the Brits and all will never do a deal, but they have to show goodwill to their allies. I think that's a big part of it.
It also allows the allies to kind of not grandstand, but use those as talking points, because Xi has come out and said, I'll host them. I'll host talks. Why do they need to be in Turkey? Why do the Americans even need to be involved? They can do them here and I'll host them. They could even do them in Central Asia and we'll host them. And, that's good that Xi did put that out there. He won't be taken up on the offer, but that's the point. So it does give them that opportunity. And I agree. Playing the game is part of it. Russia's really good at that kind of playing the game, playing along. China does the same thing. India, not so much, but China does the same thing. They're both very, very amazing in their foreign policy and diplomacy.
And I mean, look at the North Korea chess move. I think that was brilliant. I think the whole thing around what they did with North Korea was incredibly brilliant strategically on a worldwide basis, because it has affected, for instance, if the Europeans now say we want to go to war with Russia, they know what's European got a 1 million man army. Also, so they know that we are going to go to war with Russia, that means we're going to war with Russia and North Korea. The U.S. knows, crap, if we go get in the war with China and North Korea is going to be right in it, and then Russia's automatically in it as soon as we fire one. See what I mean? It is the kind of strategic things that they've done are powerful on a worldwide chessboard basis.
Very much the embodiment of kind of speak softly and carry a big stick, or let your actions kind of speak for you. He quietly visited North Korea. Kim went to Korea or went to Russia twice. I love that they were so tongue-in-cheek and very cheeky about the Koreans being there, denying it up until they thanked them at the very end about how valiant and professional they were. That there's a reason why they were there, to get the experience and to be trained. People have no clue about North Korea if they don't go out of their way to try to learn it, because everything that America says about North Korea is a lie. That is an entire population that will all be mobilized if they go to war. They are all mobilized, men and women above the age of 18, all mobilized. And they just sent a couple thousand men down to Russia to go learn in one of the most brutal wars in the last couple decades. So North Korea is not to be trifled with, and they're basically China Junior. And you're China. You're looking at how many million-man army do they have? I mean, it's insane. Plus, their drone swarms, and they now have drone motherships. Like it's insane. You can't even fathom it. So you're right. It is good to kind of play the game. It gives them time to sort of show off, or kind of be like, this is what we would do if we were actually given the reins in this process. And it's clear that we're not.
The other thing is, I think, the symbolism of North Korea, because, in Russia, the greatest honor is to defend the motherland or fatherland, yes, depending, I don't know which it is, but both the mother fatherland, the parent land, right? But the greatest honor in Russia is to defend the motherland. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when they said the Koreans were here defending the motherland, the symbolism of that was clear. Hey, these people get the greatest honor. They are our very close friends. They came to defend the motherland. That implies something. That clearly implies if you attack them, we got to help them. Look what they've done. They've got they've lost troops. They've fought and died to defend Russian soil. If you fight them, we got no choice. We have to join. We have to now. They're tied by blood. The symbolism of that. And then what happens? North Koreans are in Burkina Faso along with Russians. And now what you see is a joint kind of force going on here, where the Russians are expanding their military capabilities, their military reach. It is, again, incredibly powerful, symbolic and actually kinetic moves they're making that are, I'll put it like this. While they're talking, and the Americans are talking and threatening and things, and the Russians are actually taking action.
I think that says a lot about the Eurasian alliance that's definitely been getting stronger and more prominent over the last, I'd say, like 2 decades. And you brought up the symbolism, and I'm glad that you pointed it out. This is something that is probably lost on a lot of Westerners, especially Brits and Americans, is that it's not a coalition of the willing, where like they're like liberalized and they have to go and whatever. They asked to go to Russia. They asked to deploy troops there. It wasn't a, we need to do this coalition and build this up and go fight. So yes, there is that intrinsic, very symbolic sort of tie. And like we discussed earlier, these civilizational states, everything for them is existential. Everything has symbolism tied into it. So yes, it is hugely symbolic that they fought and died together in Kursk. Maybe I don't know how many Koreans died, if any, but that they fought together in Kursk and freed Russian land from Ukrainians and foreign mercenaries who were torturing civilians. So yes, that is a huge, huge symbolic gesture.
Yeah, I think it's something that ties the Russian people to North Koreans, that the Russian people will see North Koreans as a brotherly kind of people. They do have like 100-kilometer border. And of course, now that they fought side by side again, but in modern times, I think it's powerful. Your thoughts on and I know you don't talk about this a lot, but your thoughts on the internal politics in the U.S. The Democrats, I don't know the hell what's going on. I don't know what the Democrat. I don't see you talk about this, but the state of the Democratic Party. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I pay more attention to the Republicans, one, because they're in charge, they have the power, and two, because they're more entertaining. But don't ever miss a Jasmine Crockett clip. The Democrats they just seem feckless. They don't even know what they're doing. I full disclosure, I caucused for Bernie in 2016. I bought
Me too.
And I almost did it again in 2020. I was on board and I was like, if he gets through this primary, I'm going to go ham and I will be his like #1 campaigner. And then the same thing happened. So I'm glad I didn't go, full no holds barred the second time. But I know I see them parading this man out again. Now, I don't hate Bernie. There's a lot of people that hate Bernie. I don't hate Bernie. I don't look at him as a sellout. I don't feel that way at all. Why are you parading this old man around with AOC and trying to trick us again into this nonsense? It's really disheartening for me. It's really disheartening. And I see the young people that the Democrats kind of put up in front of it, these David Hogues and whatever that other guy is, the TikTok kids. I don't know what their names are, but I'm like, nobody can relate to these people. And that's what's happened to the Democrats. Is they're so unrelatable. They nobody can relate to the Democrats. They live in Delulu land. The only people that relate to the Democrats, and I'm sorry, this might be rude, is the LGBT and the minorities. And the minorities are even losing them now. So it's like the jig is up. They have to start pandering to the working class like they're supposed to. And I'm afraid that they won't be humble enough to admit that because they're no longer a working class party. They're a party of coastal elites. So the Democrats have a very, very hard uphill battle. I don't think that they're going to come out. A lot of people are hopeful for the midterms. For the Democrats, I'm not. I don't think that they'll be winning. I don't think they'll be getting majorities in either of the houses in the midterms. So yeah. I feel like the Democratic Party, AOC is not the one. Bernie is not the one. He should not be spearheading this. You did him wrong twice, which in turn gave everybody a poor taste in their mouth. What happened in 2016? Bernie voters went to Trump, and most of them are still there. So what are you doing to win those people back? And parading Bernie out with AOC isn't going to win those people back over. He's saying the same thing he said both times he ran, and you're just going to pull the rug out from under us again.
Well, it seems to me what they have now is they've got the woke crowd. Right. The Democrats, they've got the woke crowd, they've got the coastal elites and the older minorities. You know what I mean? Yeah. The people who've been the Democrats since, the 1950s or 40s or something, and they're still set in their ways. The younger minorities, they're either staying home or voting for Jill Stein. Or the younger people, period. 30s and unders, 40s or under. They're done. A lot of them are independents. I saw a thing that said like 65 to 70% of people under 30 have a positive view of socialism, right? They're getting screwed by the system so bad that they believe They want some kind of change. So they don't even have the minorities per se, but they've just got old people and elites, people who, you know what I mean? That's what they got. They're in deep trouble.
The 90s. The 90s was when
Yeah.
they said, no more class consciousness. Now your identity is what determines your class. So if you're Black or if you're gay or if you're a woman, you're automatically working class because you're oppressed because of who you are. And that's where we are now. And the younger minorities and younger women, I would say 30 and under, 25 and under, are like, this doesn't apply. So
yeah, and I think what's happening too, I think what is, and I always bring this up, what we do is important. What you and I do is important. That one of the issues that the system has is there's people like Garland and Sarah out here who, you know, we're not on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or something like that. We're just a bunch of, you know, a couple of people sitting at home in front of a webcam or something, talking, but being open and honest and saying what we think, not pretending that we know it all. And I think that the average person would much rather watch somebody like us that they identify with than watch Anderson Cooper, who's literally, his mother was Gloria Vanderbilt.
I was gonna say, he's a Vanderbilt.
You know, like that guy's looking at, you know what I mean? Watch these people making $30,000 a show. I think that whole thing is dying. And people are now just looking at regular people like us who also are saying, well, we'd be the ones that you'd send to war.
Yeah.
You know, we'd be the ones that that suffer. We'd be the ones that lose everything, you know, so we ain't down with this stuff. And I think average people who's, you know, their life is deteriorating, would rather just listen to us run off at the mouth saying much of nothing than they would listen to Anderson Cooper lie to them and give them CIA talking points.
Yeah, I think that people, and that's a lot of the reason why we even got popular, is because we were regular people. We were always talking to subscribers and always on spaces, and people really do. And that's why YouTube, stuff like this is so important. Streaming is important because it breaks down that fourth wall. We don't have a fourth. Nobody's watching CNN or Fox. I mean, I watch it every once in a while to see what they're doing just for fun, but like nobody's watching those. They're all struggling. And because it's because of that. And that's something that the woke crowd should know. People like to watch and listen to people that are like them. That's something that the woke has paraded about. And if people aren't watching you, it's probably because they can't relate to you. And that's something that Democrats just can't really like grasp.
Well, the one other thing too, and I'll say this, I guess it sounds simplistic. People know right and wrong when they see it. Right. And this whole Gaza thing, they turn on TV and it's like Hamas must be stopped and the Israelis Israel must be able to defend itself, and notwithstanding that international law says nothing of the sort. But so they turn on TV and they get a bunch of Zionists and billionaires and people telling them that what Israel's doing is fine and it's right. And people know right from wrong. And when they turn on people like us, or they look at our channels, or whether Telegram or whatever, and we're putting stuff up saying this is crap, this is wrong, they're killing innocent people, this is terrible, and you know, putting up clips from Ben Gvir and people like that saying what the hell's going on here, this is terrible. People know the difference between right and wrong, and they know good and well when they turn on the TV and one guy or girl says everything's fine, we must support Israel, and they put us on and we say this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening, we should be pushing back against this, what's our government doing? People decide, I think I'll watch the people who are saying this is wrong. And you look in the chat and people are angry about that stuff in the chat, and they ally with us. At least we're talking the same, at least we have morally, we have kind of some similar beliefs.
And that's true. And you brought up Gaza. What's happening in Gaza right now is unprecedented and sick, for lack of a better word. I don't even know what to even say about Gaza anymore. And if that doesn't, and like you said, right and wrong, if people can look at that and not be disenchanted, or at least, well, I'm more radicalized, but at least disenchanted with their governments, then you might be too far gone. Like, you might be too far gone. Because what is happening in Gaza, and if you didn't pay attention to this Middle East tour of Trump and how that ties in and how it ties into Syria, God help us, because what is happening there is despicable.
Well, yeah, we're almost at the end, but I'll say this. You know, it's like sometimes And we've all been around someone in life, a person that we thought was a friend or an acquaintance, and we saw them do or say something, and we look and we're like, whoa, I can't hang around that person. You know, you thought they were your friend, and you're like, yeah, I thought Joe Blow was cool, and they're like, do something, and you're like, oh, that was terrible. I couldn't hang around a person that does that, and you just kind of cut them loose. Like, I don't, and everybody's like, hey, Garland, how come you don't hang around old Bill anymore? And I'm like, you know, I don't know. Just Bill and I, we're in different places. I don't come out and say, I saw Bill do something that was unthinkable. No, I just leave it alone. I think that's what this Gaza thing is doing. That there's a lot of people looking at, I've had people on my call-in radio show. Well, do you think the Democrats are, you know, what do you think will happen in the midterm? And I say the midterm, as far as I'm concerned, what should happen in the midterm is effectively the Nuremberg trials. Every stinking last one of them should be brought before before the Hague and tried as criminals. And whatever happens to them, dungeons or whatever is the decision. I'm not thinking about whether somebody should vote for these people or not. That's not a discussion I'm not going to have. I'm trying to have.
Sound like Nick Cruz. He's like, what are we talking about here? We're not talking about voting for these people. Like, we got to get these people out. Yeah, exactly. Like, he's like, why are we talking about whether Bibi and Trump are getting along? If Trump isn't throwing Bibi into prison, I don't want to hear anything about it. Exactly that. Like, voting. What voting? We have a literal genocide going on in Gaza. And they're telling us there's a genocide we're not paying attention to in South Africa. That's how sick we are. That's how sick we are. We're importing 60 South African refugees and making a spectacle of it, while Israel openly plans to move 1.9 Gazans into a tiny area around the Rafah crossing and hold 75% of Gaza. But we're parading South Africans around on TV. That's where we are right now as a country. That's sick.
Yeah, we've got literally, we're just about at the end, but I'll say this. When you think about it, you've got a small town city, and you block off the exits so nobody can come in or leave. You won't allow food or water in for all of the 1 million or 2 million people in there. You won't allow food and water in. They can't come. They can't go. They can't eat. They can't drink. And you drop bombs and bullets on them night and day. What do you call that? What kind of fiends do such a thing? And at that point, to me, there's a term I like to use, and I always say this. I like to use this. People have probably heard it before. You know, guy walks into a bar and he sees the woman of his dreams, and they start talking. Oh, tell me about it. And they're back and forth, and he's like, oh, I really like her. She's, oh, boy, this will work out. He tells her about himself, and he's thinking, oh boy, I think I found the one. And he says, anything else you need to tell me? She goes, well, you know, every couple months, I kidnap a family of 4 and sew them up with a chainsaw. I'm a chainsaw massacre. Just do that every couple months. But, you know, other than that, I'm great. And he's like, oh, that's a deal breaker. Check, please. Check, please. You have to have a deal breaker. He can't say, well, nobody's perfect. I think let's see how this works out. So to me, when it comes to even supporting your government, there has to be a deal breaker. Genocide's got to be a deal breaker. And this discussion about who you're going to vote for in the midterm,
I don't care.
It's like either way you vote for genocide. So that's my point. And that is to everybody in the chat or anybody who wants to know what Garland Nixon thinks about U.S. politics, deal breaker. That's what I think. Genocide is a deal breaker.
Should have been a deal breaker. Watching a little girl crawl in a fire through a tent city is a deal breaker. And if you're not at that point, then you're too far gone. Go seek Jesus, mental help, or just get off the online, because you don't need to be around other people. But the scenes that are coming out of Gaza and our president's lack of commentary on it, other than to say Bibi's frustrating me or throw a bone here and there, is pathetic. And when you find out why, it's because there's contracts flowing out of there like Iraq in 2003. And that's why. That they're not going to end that war either.
Putin's gone crazy. What, really? Putin's gone crazy. But Benjamin Netanyahu and his crew are perfectly fine. Putin's gone crazy. He's firing missiles into cities. Really? Such as perhaps Gaza? Oh, really? And he surrounded Kiev and no food and water allowed, and he's bombing them night and day. Is that what he's doing? I don't think that. So, and we've got to stop the killing, needless killing on the battlefield in Ukraine. What about Gaza?
5,000 a week in Ukraine, and Russia is talking about troop death. This latest large-scale attack that Russia completed on Kiev, I shouldn't say only, less than a dozen people died, which every death is a tragedy of civilians. But that speaks volumes about the surgicality and what the plans were for those strikes. They hit what they were supposed to hit and not civilians. When we watch Israel live stream the killing of 500 civilians, not a peep. So,
and Ukraine throws like 500 drones at Russia. Everywhere. And Trump's like, oh boy, what time is it? Is it lunchtime yet? Russia fires back. Oh my God, they've gone crazy.
Exactly. They attempted.
It's a war, dude.
What was an attempt on Putin's life?
And it's a war.
I know that.
You know what it's like? It's like sitting back watching a boxing match, and one guy punches the other guy in the snoot, and the other guy punches back, and somebody says, "Do you believe that guy just punched that guy? He's a crazy person." It's a boxing match. I kind of think that's what you do. This is literally a war, and you're shocked that people are firing missiles at each other in a war. Which just goes to show that we'll just end by saying that you can't look at Trump's comments and evaluate them from a rational perspective, a sensible perspective. They're just a pile of bull crap, and who knows what it's going to be today or tomorrow. But guess what? I think we just resolved this whole thing so we can move on.
Yep.
We fixed it all. At least we've evaluated it all. But so tell everybody where they can find all your good works, not your bad works. We'll keep those hidden, only your good works.
Yeah, the bad works are on Daily Mail. The good works are on Ddgeopolitics.com or Substack. Some of the articles are paid. There's a lot of free content on there, but we're really pulling in a lot of research about the privatization of both Gaza and Ukraine. And now I'm going to start working on Latin America. It's really crazy what this administration is doing. Not Trump. Let me specify. It's mostly the peripherals, but yeah, it's pretty sick. So ddgeopolitics.com, Substack, Twitter, and Telegram.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, I'll end by saying this. Even when people are like, Trump's doing this, Trump's doing that, didn't everybody just come out and say Biden didn't know what the hell was going on? Mm-hmm. So everybody just admitted that the president doesn't run this operation. Everybody's like, Biden had no idea what was going on. The system, the president, okay, and now Trump's do you think it changed? No. Trump's a figurehead. He makes some noise. He causes some aggravation, but he ain't running this. Biden wasn't running the operation. Reagan wasn't running the operation. The operation has an autopilot. Thank you very much, Sarah. Follow her on Telegram and YouTube. They got a great YouTube show, right? Also, so don't forget that. Those are two big ones, and everywhere else. Oh, Substack, that's a big one too, right? Substack, all right, thanks a lot, everybody. Hey, follow me on Rockfin, follow me on Rumble, follow me on, of course, Patreon. If you want to contribute, of course, PayPal, buy me a coffee, whatever the case may be. And last but not least, you'll look at the bottom and you'll see my PO box. If you want to mail whatever you want to mail to my PO box, be it just a letter of good word, if you want to mail a contribution, if you want to mail a book that you recommend, whatever you want, I got a PO box now. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. I'm out.